He's dribbling the ball with everything on the line. He's driving down the pitch. He's facing price hikes and cuts past him. Carrier Contracts tries to block him. Oh, he leaves him in the dust. He's at the edge of the box. He cuts past the nonstop group chat trash talk. He clears on goal. He shoots. Goal! Unlimited data for $25 a month forever!
Visit your local Boost Mobile store today to get unlimited data with a price that never changes. Boost Mobile. After 30 GB, customers may experience lower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost $25 unlimited plan.
When Kohler, global design leader in luxurious kitchen and bath products, asked me to be their ambassador for timeless, elegant, durable cast iron, I said, I'm in. Soon after, I was in their Kohler, Wisconsin foundry, watching molten iron poured, enamel applied by hand, and the beautiful finished pieces ready to ship. Since 1883, Kohler cast iron has been crafted by incredible artisans, and seeing it firsthand gave me a whole new appreciation for their craftsmanship. Now, I'm proud to lend my stamp of approval to my favorite Kohler cast iron products for their durability, beauty, and enduring style. Shop my curated picks at Kohler.com. As the Kohler Cast Iron Ambassador, I say, long live cast iron.
Hi, it's Kyle McLaughlin, host of the What Are We Even Doing podcast. You know, my favorite part of the morning is that first cup of coffee, a small, quiet ritual that sets the rhythm for my day. That's why I appreciate DeLonghi. For over 50 years, they've combined Italian craftsmanship and thoughtful design. And as the #1 espresso machine brand in the world, they make it effortless. Just a damn fine cup of coffee in your own kitchen. Right now, you can save 10% off your purchase at DeLonghi.com with code Kyle at checkout. After all, if it's not Italian, is it even espresso?
Your social media feed delivers plenty of advice, but it doesn't know you. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't give physical exams or order tests. Doctors do. At the American Medical Association, we believe the best care starts with a real conversation with someone who understands the science and your unique health. So stay curious, ask questions, but when it's time to make decisions, make them with a doctor. Learn more at amahealthversushype.org. That's amahealthvshype.org.
What if everything you thought you knew about autism and mental health wasn't the full story? Today's conversation might change the way you see it. Welcome to Why Not Me? Embracing autism and mental health worldwide, where real conversations and lived experiences inspire understanding and hope. I'm Tony Mantor. This is where understanding begins. If this kind of conversation matters to you, then follow the show so you don't miss what comes next. Joining us today is Weanne Estrada. She is part of the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, known as ADRA, a global organization serving communities in need around the world. This is not about titles or roles. It's about lives touched, the challenges faced, and the moments that don't always get seen. Today, we're going beyond the surface to talk about what it really means to serve and how those experiences shape the person behind the work. Thanks for joining us today.
Of course. No, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this, getting to talk about some of my favorite topics. So thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. If you would, give us a little background on what you do.
Sure. So I am a mental health specialist at ADRA International. So ADRA, that's the Adventist Development and Relief Agency. We are the global humanitarian arm of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and we're currently operating in more than 120 countries. Worldwide, we have about 1,000 different projects, and they're in the different fields of health, nutrition, water, education, livelihoods, or emergencies. And across all of that, mental health is embedded into them. And so what I do as the mental health specialist is, and among a range of different roles, there's maybe two core ones. And one is I help design and implement our mental health and psychosocial support programs. And so that involves making sure that these programs follow international guidelines, that they're delivered effectively and safely for our beneficiaries, that they're culturally adapted, they're relevant, and they're feasible. And then the other part of the work that I do is also I support the staff that we deploy during emergencies. So there are certain occasions when a major humanitarian crisis might completely overwhelm the capacities of the local country office. And so what we do in the situations, for example, last year when Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica, or this year with a war in the Middle East, is that we deploy some of our personnel to help out those offices. And so what I do is, because these staff members are going to be undergoing, a new culture, a new environment, a very stressful job in these new placements, I make sure that they're well supported, that they have the tools in the toolkit to be able to maintain their resilience during deployment, and that they have the intended supports in place. So yeah, those are just like in a nutshell.
You've had the opportunity to work in some of the more challenging environments in the world. Can you give us a moment that changed the way that you understand mental health?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up in the Philippines. I actually started out as a nurse there. When I was younger, I just knew that I wanted to work in the humanitarian field. And back then, it was because of a very simple reason. I wanted to travel for work and I wanted to help people. So I thought, why don't I travel for work while helping people? And I thought that was what a humanitarian would do. But then I think one formative experience for me was, growing up in the Philippines. Unfortunately, we're exposed to a lot of different typhoons, hurricanes throughout the year. And so growing up, I was keenly aware of the effect that this had on people, on children, on vulnerable populations. And so one time I volunteered to help out with this operation where basically this was during one of the major typhoons. And they were essentially airlifting people from a different province who had been affected by the typhoon and had lost everything, had lost their homes. They were airlifting them in military airplanes and bringing them to the capital, Manila. And so my role was to welcome those people, give them psychological first aid. They had come in basically wearing the clothes that they had. So some of them were still wet. And so we make sure that they were warm, they had food to eat. We would register them and then we would essentially load them up into cars so that they could be either transported to, some of them might have had relatives to live with in that area. But then others, I don't really know where they were, shipped off to, for lack of a better word. And so that experience, it made me think of displacement and what are we doing to follow up with these needs of these people? These people we've just a few days ago, they were safe and warm in their homes, and now they're essentially transplanted in different community. What effect does this have on their mental health? Is there any sort of follow-up available? So I think that was really formative to me wanting to go into this work.
When people think about mental health, especially in humanitarian efforts, most always they will think about trauma. Most of the time, it's much more than that. What are some of the things that they're missing when they think that way?
I think that's a great question, and you're absolutely right, Tony. So one of the biggest misconceptions about mental health, especially in crisis settings, is that it's only about clinical care. But in humanitarian contexts, people are affected at many different levels. So yes, there are some people who are experiencing severe mental health conditions, right? And they'll need therapy. But then many more are dealing with stress, disruption, with the loss of routine, and, the breakdown of their social systems. So what we do, we call it MHPSS, right? It stands for mental health and psychosocial support. It's just broader than mental health services. It includes everything from basic psychological support and community activities to more specialized care for people experiencing severe distress or mental health conditions. Because the challenge in this field is that you need to triage. There's just a wide range of different needs, and not everyone in crisis will need therapy, but they will all need support of some kind. And we need to be able to match the intervention with the need, because if we give everybody therapy, we'll overwhelm the specialist services. If we just give people basic care, then we're leaving people with more significant needs out of the equation. And so what we have for mental health is, we call it the MHPSS pyramid. And each level of the pyramid provides a different type of support. So at the most basic level, we have basic services and security. At the most basic level, people need safety, right? They need stability. They need access to essential services. Because in crisis settings, stress is not just because of the trauma that they've experienced to get to this point, but it's also by ongoing conditions that they're living in. There's lack of shelter, food insecurity, uncertainty. And so for ADRA, one of the basic things we do is we make sure that we provide food, water, shelter, and healthcare first. And while those those may not be traditionally seen as mental health interventions, they do have a direct impact on well-being. So like that's the first level. And then we go to the second level, which is all about community and family supports, because crisis often disrupt social networks. Families may be separated, people's roles are lost. And so at ADRA, we focus on rebuilding and strengthening those social systems. So things like reuniting families, maybe building child-friendly spaces so that children who have lost access to like schooling and safe places will have a safe space to play. Maybe that's making peer support groups so that women, youth can all support each other. So that's level 2. And then level 3, now we're getting to the more focused type of supports. These are for people who are experiencing more significant distress. They may be overwhelmed. They will need more structured support, but they're not necessarily needing psychiatric care at this point. So at this level, we provide psychological first aid. We teach them problem-solving strategies. We teach them how to manage their stress. And these are often delivered by trained non-specialists. And then lastly, the top level of this pyramid, sorry for this crash course, is the specialized services that we provide. And these are for people who are actually experiencing major depression, PTSD, psychosis that require clinical intervention. So at this point, we maybe have clinics, we have mobile clinics, and these clinics provide psychiatric care, medication management, or if they're not capable of doing those, they're at least capable of assessing these patients and then referring them to a higher level of care. Just this huge pyramid, recognizing that in these settings, you're not just targeting one level of trauma or one level of need, but you're targeting this whole layer, intricate, interlayering need.
Now, you just brought up psychosis, and that deals with serious mental illness. How do cultural differences shape the way that is understood? Because when you get into psychosis and anosognosia, many times that is so misunderstood. So what is the thought process when you're dealing with different countries around the world?
Yeah, for sure. Culture really plays a huge role in mental health, and it's not just psychosis, right? And one thing that I want to bring up is that mental health manifests in many different ways. So cultural adaptation is absolutely essential in this work. We can't apply just a one-size-fits-all model. So for example, sometimes when we come into a community, we need to start with listening and understanding how communities describe distress, what coping mechanisms already exist, and what support systems are trusted. And so we try to talk to the leaders in the community and understand who are the people in the community that people turn to when they want to talk about mental health. Where do they want to go? Is that a health clinic, or maybe it's just a school or a community space? And then when we create the interventions, we want to make sure that we're using very locally relevant examples. Like maybe, if we're working in a more Western context, maybe the stressors that people have are related to like their jobs or personal issues. But in these crisis settings, maybe their challenges would go around accessing water, livelihoods. And so we make sure that the examples we're using are locally relevant. And then the way that we deliver support also changes. So in some contexts, individual counseling might feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable, especially if people are used to more collective ways of coping. So group-based approaches like community support groups might actually be more effective, but then maybe in some settings they don't want to spill, their personal problems in front of the whole group. And so in those settings, we choose to do more individual therapy. And then also we have to recognize that some communities already have their coping mechanisms. Maybe in the more Western setting, we think, journaling is a great way for people to improve their mental health. But then in other cultural settings, what might be more effective for them are faith-based practices. Maybe it's storytelling or community rituals. So we want to make sure that we respect those cultural considerations.
What does recovery look like when you're dealing with places around the world where resources are almost non-existent?
Yeah, so this comes into mind questions for me. It comes into mind concepts related to resilience, right? And what it would look like in these settings. Oftentimes in these settings, resilience and recovery, it isn't this dramatic, heroic thing. It's not something that we immediately see. In humanitarian settings, resilience and recovery can look very ordinary. Maybe it's a parent finding a way to comfort their child child in a place that doesn't feel safe. It could be someone waking up and continuing daily life even when everything has changed. It could be a mother that chooses to, and I use this example because it's something that actually happens in real life. Could be a mother that's decided to eat again after giving birth. And let me share this example with you. Is we have this mobile clinic operating in Yemen, and we have postpartum mothers there who are affected by conflict and displacement. And this mother, she had a child who had deformities, she had anemia, she had anxiety, she had insomnia. And when she found out that her fourth baby was going to be another boy, she wanted a daughter, she got depressed and she refused to eat. And so we had a midwife come and talk to her, visited her several different times, gave her psychoeducation, helped her reduce the size of the problem in her head. And then after this, she was able to recover, to accept that these are her circumstances, and she was able to thrive. So recovery, it can look like a lot of things. It can look like people deciding to take their medications regularly, but it can also just look like people taking the first step and asking for help.
Have you ever had a time when you're working and you question to yourself, is enough being done here? Then after you assess it, what conclusion did you come up with and how did you handle it?
I think the question is, the work is never going to be enough. The need is always going to be great. And I think especially these days, we have a lot of conflict that are going to definitely increase the number of people displaced, to have wars. Just in 2024 alone, I think there were about 124 million people who were displaced. When I think about that number, I think of another statistic which says that 1 in every 5 people who are displaced have a mental health condition. So when we think 1 in 5 of 122 million, we're thinking of millions of people who have just a great need for mental health care. So when I think of that, it's easy to become discouraged. But I think what motivates me to really keep going in this field, I think, is the progress that we've seen in how MHPSS has evolved over time. One of the biggest shifts I've seen is MHPSS and mental health. Previously, it was often treated as an add-on, something we addressed after immediate needs like food, shelter, or health. But now we're seeing a much stronger recognition that mental health is actually foundational to recovery and not separate from it. So that gives me hope. But even then, one say, Tony, there's really so much that needs to be done in this field. We need sustained investment that includes funding, but that also includes political will and a broader shift in how we think about supporting people affected by crisis. Because the reality is, in many of the places that we work, people already know what they need. Communities understand their challenges, they're capable, but they're missing the resources to actually deliver that support at the scale that's needed. So it's not always a question of what should we do, but a question of how do we sustain and expand and get investment for what we know already works.
Hey everyone, it's Cal Penn, host of Earsay, the Audible and iHeart audiobook club. This week on the podcast, I'm sitting down with Lily Chu, the author of the Audible original romantic comedy, Just Kiss Already. It's a story about a forensic anthropologist who secretly writes mystery novels, an actress who adapts his book into a film, and what happens when a meme and a media tour collide with a slow burn romance. It's performed by Simu Liu and Philippa Sue, and it is an absolute blast.
When you actually hear the performance, you realize that other people are taking your words, and what you thought was kind of a straightforward sentence like, the cat in the corner is black. Mm-hmm. In my head, it's the cat in the corner is black, not the dog, not the gerbil. Yeah. But someone else might say it, the cat in the corner is black. That's always fascinating to me, how they just bring in all these different nuances and really make it fun and interesting and distinctive.
Listen to Earsay, the Audible and iHeart audiobook club on the iHeart Radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
He's dribbling the ball with everything on the line. He's driving down the pitch. He's facing price hikes and cuts past him. Carrier contracts, tries to block him. Oh, he leaves him in the dust. He's at the edge of the box. He cuts past the nonstop group chat trash talk. He clears on goal. He shoots. Goal! Unlimited data for $25 a month forever!
Visit your local Boost Mobile store today to get unlimited data with a price that never changes. Boost Mobile. After 30 GB, customers may experience lower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost $25 unlimited plan.
When Kohler, the global design leader in luxurious kitchen and bath products, came to me and said, "Martha, we need an ambassador for our timeless, elegant, durable cast iron products," I said, "I'm in. Now let me see the factory." Weeks later, I was suited up in coveralls and work boots, walking through their Kohler, Wisconsin cast iron foundry. I stood next to the molten iron furnace, saw the hand-applying enamel, and touched the gorgeous finished products waiting to be sent out into the world. Since 1883, Kohler cast iron products have been forged and finished by the incredible craftspeople right in Kohler, Wisconsin. I'll tell you, I gained a newfound respect and appreciation for Kohler's cast iron craftsmanship. So now, I'm lending my discerning stamp of approval to my most beloved Kohler cast iron products for their durability, beauty, and timelessness. Shop my Kohler cast iron favorites curated on Kohler.com. Bring the warmth, character, and enduring style of these timeless products into your kitchens and bathrooms. As the Kohler cast iron ambassador, I say, long live cast iron.
Hi, it's Kyle MacLachlan, host of the What Are We Even Doing podcast. You know, my favorite part of the morning is that first cup of coffee, a small, quiet ritual that sets the rhythm for my day. That's why I appreciate DeLonghi. For over 50 years, they've combined Italian craftsmanship and thoughtful design. And as the #1 espresso machine brand in the world, they make it effortless. Just a damn fine cup of coffee in your own kitchen. Right now, you can save 10% off your purchase at DeLonghi.com with code Kyle at checkout. After all, if it's not Italian, is it even espresso?
Right. How do you build a trust with people that have every reason not to trust a system of professionals?
That's, again, another great question. And this, again, goes into topics related to stigma. You know, when stigma is integrated into the system and people enter a healthcare clinic and they experience stigma, then it affects the way that they'll continue to engage with that system. And so what we do is we make sure that we train staff to communicate in a respectful, non-judgmental way and to avoid stigmatizing language, because even small interactions can influence whether someone feels comfortable seeking support. So in many contexts, we make sure that when our staff speak, they might not necessarily say mental illness. They don't use words like crazy or phrases that can feel stigmatizing. And we tell them to use language that people already relate to, such as, maybe stress, worry, feeling overwhelmed, or maybe the lack of sleep. So it's kind of translating mental health language into that. And then one of the things we also do is, again, I've alluded to this before, is making sure that we engage with trusted community actors. This could be religious leaders, they could be teachers, community health workers, because then if trusted individuals model supportive language and then they can encourage help seeking, that can shift attitudes much more effectively than outside messaging alone. And so we engage these trusted community leaders to speak openly about mental health. And then we also really tap people with lived experience. When people hear stories that are responsibly and respectfully shared related to mental health, stigma often decreases. And so we also just normalize these conversations. We deliver support in a group setting, like in a parenting group, youth group, or community activity. It becomes normalized. We tell people that whatever they're experiencing, their stress, their responses to these abnormal experiences, they are normal and they're safe to talk about. And that's how we address self-stigma and maybe distrust in the system as well.
Okay, my next question is in two parts.
Mm-hmm.
When you step back and you look at your work,
Mm-hmm.
what gives you the most hope right now? And on the flip side, what still keeps you up at night?
Let me think about that for a second. What gives me hope? I think I briefly spoke about it. I think it's the shift that I'm starting to see in how people understand mental health. Again, for a long time, it's been treated as something secondary, something you address after everything else. But more and more, I'm seeing people recognize that mental health is foundational. And it's not separate from things like education, livelihoods, or recovery. And it allows all of those things to work. And so when I see that shift from mental health being seen as an afterthought to now being seen as a multiplier to all these different interventions, to all these different approaches, it makes me feel hopeful because it means that we're starting to understand people more holistically, not just in terms of what they need, but in terms of what helps them move forward. What keeps me awake at night? What really disheartens me sometimes is how people view refugees and a lot of these people that we serve. I think there's so many misconceptions that they are just people who are passive recipients of aid. And I think that makes people view them as people who just suck resources or people who, it kind of dehumanizes them. And so when I hear rhetoric about that, about these populations that we serve that are incredibly resourceful, who are capable, who are very resilient, it disheartens me a little bit because these people are people with so much resilience, who have overcome so much and are trying to just recover and use the tools that they have to live a normal life, the normal lives that we're living. And so I really stay up at night thinking of ways to help people care about these populations and see them as human.
Okay, so now how do people find more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so if people who are interested in what we do, especially at ADRA, you can go to our website. That's adra.org. That's adra.org. And you can learn more about our different programs there. There's also a tab up top on the website that says Ways to Give or Ways to Help, I believe. And so if you are so inclined to do so, please feel free to click that tab.
Okay, for the person listening right now who wants to help but doesn't know how, what's the first step that they have to take?
I think it's really just awareness. I did a study once on how we can make people more attuned to the needs of refugees and to their mental health. And it really starts with contact. So I would encourage people, there are refugees in your communities. There are people with mental health conditions who might be your neighbors, who might be your coworkers. And so I encourage you to talk to them, get to know them, get to know their needs, get to know their stories, what they've been through. I've had the opportunity in my life to speak with refugees who have traveled from their original countries, crossed oceans to get to where they are today, and just hearing their stories of bravery and how they're now readjusting, but also just hearing about their normal lives and what they were back in their home countries, of whether they were a doctor, a business professional, or a student. And it just humanizes these people in my eyes. So I think really the first step is awareness and getting to know your neighbor and seeing them as human, I think, is a great first step.
What is one story that kind of sticks with you? And not because it was tragic, but because it reveals something very important.
Yeah, so this story it does start out a little tragic. So I had the opportunity of interviewing some refugees who had been displaced. They had traveled to Greece. And this were because they were members of the LGBT community and they came from countries where being part of that community was a death sentence. So this particular person, he was a refugee, and his story was that he was kicked out of his village because he was gay. And then when he tried to return back to his village, and this is quite tragic, he returned to his house being burnt by the villagers with his family inside the house. And he found out that because there was a misconception in that community that being gay can be infectious, they decided to kill his whole family. And so he escaped, and he made it through foot, and then he rode on a dinghy on a boat and made his way to Athens. But then he met a donor there who spoke to him about how do you want to move forward from here. And his story was that he decided, I want to be able to help other people. I want to be able to help refugees in this area find shelter. I want to be able to give them language lessons. I want to be able to help them find gainful employment. And so this man was able to take the pain from his experiences and transform it into a way to help other people. So I believe that story really stuck with me. But also also, I think another story that goes to your second question of, what's something that was revealing. I remember asking one of these refugees once, I asked them, what is your hope from here now that you've received the supports? What do you want to be? And I came in asking that question, expecting something lofty like, oh, I want to change the world. Oh, I want to be able to become a doctor and things like that. And the person's response was, well, I want to go home eventually. Maybe I want to find work. It was just a very simple answer that made me realize that I think I was being part of the narrative that refugees should be able to rationalize their existence and the help that we give them by becoming someone extraordinary, when in reality, they don't owe us that, right? They can be just like us and they have normal aspirations just like us. And placing that expectation on them, I think, is a shift in perspective that I needed to change. And so, yeah, that was revealing to me.
Okay, so one last question is, how do you define dignity in mental health care, especially in the places where people tend to feel forgotten?
Yeah, so again, I think this also goes back to the concept of resilience. So resilience has 4 pillars, and these 4 pillars are social competence, problem solving, autonomy, and hope. So if a person has all 4 of those things, then they will have resilience. And I think your question of dignity goes to the 3rd one, and that is giving people autonomy or a sense of agency, the feeling that they have control over their life, even in constrained environments. And so we see that in a lot of small but important ways when people make decisions about their daily lives, when they contribute to their households, when they problem solve, when they decide how to manage their limited resources. So they're able to do that on their own. But I think for us, for people who are trying to help, we need to remember that when we design programs, we need to restore a sense of agency and make sure that these people whose control is often stripped from them have a voice in the interventions that we create. So supporting resilience means creating opportunities for people to make choices and have a voice. And that can be as simple as involving them in program design, or as practical as giving people options in how they access services. We're not just giving them, hey, this is what we want you to do, but we give them a voice. Maybe we even have seen refugee communities where the refugees in the communities, they're actually given roles where they're the ones who provide training to people. Maybe they were teachers in the past, and so we give them opportunities to teach at these camps. And so giving them this sense of purpose, giving them this sense of agency is a big way to give them some dignity that they might have lost in the journey it took them to get here.
Okay, so in closing, what would you like people, the listeners, to know that you think is important that they hear from you?
My message for listeners, I think, is to really reconsider how we think about people who are going through different circumstances. We often see refugees, displaced individuals in ways that are very one-dimensional, like they're just recipients of aid, but they're actually people who are incredibly resourceful, who are problem-solving every day, who are supporting each other, who are actively trying to rebuild their lives. So I think when we start looking at people that way, that shift is really critical, not just for dignity, but also for effectiveness. And I wanted actually, Tony, to quote, when preparing to speak to you on this podcast, I listened to your song that I believe this podcast title was based on your song of Why Not Me. And I know that those lyrics that you have and that song, you had specifically dedicated it to the autism community. But while I was listening to it, I couldn't help but think that you could have also just written this song about refugee communities as well. Because when you talk about mountains that have to be climbed or oceans that need to be crossed, these are literally and figuratively the things that refugees have to overcome, right? They need to get to the other side of the mountain. They literally have to cross oceans so they can see the dream that they have and realize and get away from the dangers that they have and experience reach the goals that they have for themselves. So I think looking at, refugees from that perspective as people who are overcomers rather than as people who are victims, I hope that's what listeners take away.
Yeah, nice. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks again. A sincere thank you to our guests for sharing their journey with us today. We appreciate their honesty, courage, and willingness to open their heart in hopes of helping others. If today's conversation helped you see the world a little differently, then we've accomplished exactly what we set out to do. Until next time, keep believing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep asking yourself, why not me?
The official language of football is trash talk, late-night group chats, memes, and unbelievable highlight clips. That's why Boost Mobile brings you our new global connection plan, the first plan ever made for WhatsApp. Get unlimited data, talk and text, international roaming, and calls to over 100 countries for just $40 a month.
$40 price includes $5 a month auto pay discount. After 40 gigabytes of premium high-speed data, speeds will be lowered. Coverage not available everywhere. Visit store or boostmobile.com for details.
250 years ago, America made a promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Since 1903, Harley-Davidson has been living it, out on the open road, at the next exit ramp, with old friends, new ones, and the next generation of riders. Because the best part of any promise is keeping it. Harley-Davidson Motorcycles. Ride.
I love the little everyday moments with my dog, especially treat time. But dental care, not always so fun. Until we found Greenie's Dental Treats. These are more than just tasty. They're vet recommended and designed to support the 4 areas vets check the most: plaque, tartar, gums, and breath. Their unique texture cleans down to the gum line and supports cleaner teeth after 28 days when fed daily. It's a simple daily habit that supports their health and gives us another moment to enjoy together. Greenies make health a treat. Shop now at greenies.com.
Jardiance has a big story to tell. Discover Jardiance empagliflozin 10 or 25 milligram tablets. Visit Jardiance.com, call 1-888-968-6648, or talk to your doctor to see if Jardiance is right for you.
A little pill with a big story to tell.